Welcome to No Sleep, where the night never ends, and every whisper in the dark could be something real. Tonight's story isn't just horror. It's a memory, a warning, a door that should have stayed closed. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, don't fall asleep. Before everything went wrong, before the dreams, the blood, and the cold, I was just a man, 32, average, working class. My name barely mattered even then, and now it's almost like a ghost, something I used to be, not someone I am. I worked the night shift at a tire plant in Ohio, the kind of place that hums with machinery and drips with sweat. My life was ordinary, grueling, but stable. I had a girlfriend, Melissa, who worked mornings at a diner. We shared a cramped one-bedroom apartment above a pawn shop and argued about laundry and leftovers. She loved cats. I hated them. We were making it work. It was Thursday when I died. No warning, no pain. One moment I was lifting a 30-pound OTR tire into a stack, and the next, darkness. No fade, no panic, just sudden, merciless nothing. Later, they told me I dropped between the tires like a puppet with its strings cut. My coworker, Denny, said I turned blue in seconds, that my eyes rolled back like shutters slamming shut. He swore I was gone before I hit the concrete. Paramedics arrived in minutes. They used the defibrillator 3 times. I flatlined for 6 minutes. No oxygen, no heartbeat, no pulse. They called it a miracle that I came back. The doctors in the ER shook their heads when they saw the scans. He shouldn't be alive, one muttered, unaware I was conscious, groggy, and clinging to the ceiling of my mind like a spider, afraid of falling. They called it cardiac arrest. Sudden, unexpected. They didn't know why. No history, no warning signs. My heart just quit. I wish it had stayed that way. During those 6 minutes, I saw something. Not the tunnel of light cliché. No pearly gates. No family members with outstretched hands. I saw a door. It was tall, heavy, metal bolted, incomplete. The edges shimmered like heat haze, and something behind it screamed. Not loud, but constant. A dull, muffled scream, like someone underwater and on fire. I couldn't see what was behind the door, but I felt it, writhing, massive, coiled like a centipede waiting for warmth. When I came back, the door slammed shut behind me, but it didn't disappear. It stayed lodged in my memory like a rotten tooth. They kept me in the ICU for days, ran every test imaginable. The cardiologist said my heart was too damaged to function long-term. It's like driving a car after a head-on collision, he said. You can patch it up, but it's not going far. I asked him how long I had. He shrugged. Months, maybe a year, unless we get a donor. I spent the next 9 months dying slowly. Melissa lasted 2. She cried the first week, tried to hold it together the second. By month 3, her voice changed, less soft, more edge. By month 4, she was staying out late and never coming home. One day, she left a note on the fridge beside a bag of cat food. I can't do this anymore. I need to live and you're already gone. She wasn't wrong. The days blurred. I couldn't work, couldn't drive. I filled my time with long stares at the ceiling and even longer nights waiting for my heart to stop. Sometimes I hoped it would. Every beat felt like a lie, something artificial, borrowed. I stopped dreaming. Or maybe I just stopped remembering. Then, one night, the phone rang. It was 3:08 a.m. I'll never forget that time. The world outside was silent, suffocating. Even the streetlights looked dimmer than usual. I was wide awake, listening to the thump, thump of my dying heart when the phone vibrated on the bedside table. a woman's voice, clear and practiced. "Mr. Crane, this is from Mercy General. We've located a donor. You need to come in immediately." I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just said, "Okay," and hung up. Then I screamed. Not in joy, not in fear, in something in between. A sound like birth and death, colliding in my throat. The hospital was already prepped when I arrived. Everything moved fast. Paperwork, tests, signatures. My body was shaking from nerves, but my mind was calm, eerily calm, like something had taken over just to get through it. A young anesthesiologist smiled at me as I lay on the gurney. "It's your second chance," she said, placing the mask over my face. I wanted to tell her it wasn't, that I didn't believe in second chances anymore, that something was already waiting behind that door I saw, the one that didn't belong in this world. Instead, I just breathed deep and slipped under. I woke up to ice. Not cold, ice, freezing. My chest felt like a block of dry ice had been embedded beneath the skin. My teeth chattered so violently, I bit the inside of my cheek. My fingers were purple, my toes numb. I was drenched in sweat, but I couldn't stop shaking. The nurse smiled. "Just the anesthesia," she said. "It'll pass." But it didn't. It never did. I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding. Only it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt heavy, alien, like something stitched into me that didn't want to stay. Every beat thudded with intent, like it was testing the boundaries of my ribs. I touched my chest, felt the stitches, felt the warm bandages, and beneath it, something colder than winter. That was the first time I felt it. That presence, that wrongness. I wasn't alone in there. Recovery is supposed to be hopeful. People tell you things like, "You're so lucky," and "It's a miracle," and "You must feel reborn." They expect tears of gratitude, sunrise moments, spiritual awakenings. But I woke up feeling like I was already dead and something else had crawled into my body to wear me like a costume. The first night after the transplant, I couldn't sleep. My room at the hospital was too cold. I had 3 blankets on top of me, plus a heated pad, and still, my bones ached like they were trapped in ice. My lips were blue. The nurse blamed it on circulation, side effects of surgery. "You just need time," she said. But I could tell from the look in her eyes that it wasn't normal. The cold wasn't around me, it was in me. Inside my chest, it pulsed like frostbite had a rhythm. Each heartbeat sent a shiver across my ribs like wind over a frozen lake. I remember looking down at my arms and seeing goosebumps ripple with every thud. My fingers turned gray at the tips. The monitors didn't catch it. They all said I was stable. My vitals, perfect. My temperature, fine. The heart they'd put into me was working perfectly, clinically speaking, but that thing in my chest wasn't a heart. It was a stranger, a trespasser. By day 3, I stopped telling the nurses how I felt. They didn't believe me, and I couldn't explain it anyway. I just smiled and nodded while inside I was screaming. There was a moment, I'll never forget it, when I caught my reflection in the stainless steel water pitcher. I was staring at myself. Except, I wasn't blinking. For several seconds, my face stayed frozen in place, unmoving, mouth slightly open, eyes blank. Then, suddenly, the face blinked. But I hadn't. I knocked the pitcher over and scrambled out of bed, yanking the IV from my arm. The nurse came rushing in. I told her I slipped, that I was dizzy. She believed me, but I didn't. They discharged me a week later. "Recovery at home will do you good," the doctor said, patting my shoulder. "Start slow. Listen to your body." Listen to my body? I didn't even recognize it anymore. Every breath I took felt like it wasn't mine. My voice sounded different, deeper somehow, like it carried more weight than it used to. Melissa was gone, of course, and I didn't blame her. I had no one to come home to, just the pale walls of my apartment and the lingering smell of stale laundry and cat food. I stood in the doorway for a long time, staring into the shadows, half expecting to see someone else standing inside. No one was there, but it didn't feel empty. That night, I had the first dream. It started in silence. A tiled room, white walls stained pinkish brown. Fluorescent lights buzzed above, humming like a swarm of dying flies. There was a metal chair bolted to the floor in the center, worn leather restraints dangling from the arms. The air smelled like bleach and raw meat. In the corner, something dripped. In the chair, someone sat. A young man, gagged. His eyes were wild with terror, veins bulging in his forehead as he struggled against the cuffs. Blood trailed from his lip where he'd bitten himself. I could hear his panicked breathing, but there was no sound coming from me, because I was in the room too, watching, standing near the chair, circling slowly, holding something, a scalpel. The steel gleamed under the flickering light. My hand didn't tremble. My grip was steady, practiced. And worst of all, my face. I was smiling. Not with cruelty, not with rage, with pleasure. Pure, unfiltered, euphoric pleasure. Then the dream shifted, warped like an old film. The man in the chair blurred, changed, became a woman, then a child, then an elderly man. The faces rotated like masks being tested. But I stayed the same, always standing there, always smiling, always holding a new tool, a pipe, a knife, a wrench, a blowtorch. I woke up gasping. The sheets were soaked, my body drenched in sweat, but still so cold. My jaw was locked tight. My teeth ached from how hard I'd been grinding them. My hands were clenched into fists. When I opened them, I found blood under my fingernails. Not a lot, but enough. I scrambled out of bed, flipped the lights on. My room looked untouched. No cuts on my body, no wounds, just the smell, something sharp and metallic, like rust or pennies or scorched metal. I tore the bed apart. Nothing. I scrubbed my hands until the skin went raw, still cold, always cold. The dreams came again the next night, and the next. Always the same, always that room, always me doing things I never remembered, holding instruments I'd never used, watching people I didn't know bleed under fluorescent lights. I started leaving lights on, avoiding sleep, taking caffeine pills, watching endless hours of TV just to stay awake. But the heart didn't like that. It punished me. My chest would ache with a dull, pounding throb. My vision would blur. I'd get sudden bursts of rage, like an animal was trying to claw its way out of my ribcage. I was afraid of my own body. And then something happened that terrified me more than all the dreams. I noticed a scar. Not the one on my chest. Everyone expected that. This one was different. It was on the inside of my left forearm. A pale, thin X. Faint, but unmistakable. It wasn't stitched. It had healed long ago. Years, maybe. I ran my fingers over it again and again. I'd never seen it before. I knew my body. Every mole, every burn from the tire shop, every freckle from summer sun. This scar didn't belong to me, but it was part of me now, like everything else. The cold became constant. It wasn't weather cold, not the kind you chase away with sweaters or space heaters. This was internal, like something in me had died and was rotting in ice. No matter what I did, scalding showers, thermal blankets, cups of boiling tea, I couldn't feel warm. My breath fogged up the mirror, even indoors. My fingertips had turned a permanent shade of bluish gray. My reflection looked brittle, waxy, half mummified. My eyes sank into their sockets, ringed by bruised shadows. And worse than the cold were the dreams. They evolved. At first, it had been repetition. Me standing in the room, watching, circling the bound victim in that same white-tiled chamber. But then, the dreams started showing details. Memories that weren't mine, like the perspective of the one doing the hurting, not just watching it. I felt my hands wrap leather straps around wrists. I smelled blood thick in the air, fresh and steaming. I heard the screaming, muffled at first, then clear, personal, begging. I always held something, a knife, a torch, a hammer. And every time I'd raise it slowly, methodically, like I was savoring the moment before impact. Then just before the strike, before the scream reached its highest pitch, I'd wake up, and that's when the real nightmare began. I'd sit up in bed, drenched in cold sweat, my finger locked around something invisible, my breathing slow, too slow, controlled, measured, like I was trying to calm myself after enjoying something. My hands, covered in blood, sometimes dried, sometimes wet. My first instinct was always the same: check for injuries. Check the floor, the sheets, the window. Nothing. No cuts on me, no open wounds, no sign of break-in. Just the smell. Copper, burnt metal, astringent chemicals, blood. It was in the walls. I started seeing things while awake. It began with smells. That bleach and meat stench from the dream followed me through the day. I'd be at the grocery store and catch it down an aisle. I'd whip around, expecting to see someone behind me. No one. Then came the sounds, buzzing lights, like those fluorescent ones in the room. Even if I was outside in daylight, I'd hear them. A constant hum that made the fillings in my teeth ache. I thought maybe I was losing my mind. I went to a therapist, told her I'd been having nightmares, that I wasn't sleeping, that I was starting to feel wrong. She gave me antidepressants and referred me to a trauma specialist. Survivor's guilt, she said. Near-death experiences can create disassociation. I didn't have the heart to tell her that this wasn't guilt. It was possession. I kept a journal, trying to write down what I remembered from the dreams. I flipped through the pages one night and found something I hadn't written. It was a sketch, a hand-drawn version of the White Room, done in perfect detail. I didn't draw it. The lines were sharp, focused, shaded with steady hands. I don't have steady hands. But worse, on the bottom corner of the page, in tiny print, was a name. Griggs. I stared at it for hours. The name meant nothing to me. Not at first. I tore through the apartment, looking for old mail, hospital discharge forms, anything that might have accidentally gotten bundled with my paperwork. Nothing. I even checked the inside of my forearm again. That X-shaped scar still pulsed faintly under the skin. Faint, but real. I remembered something someone told me once. Some prisoners mark themselves with an X before execution, as if to say, this part of me is already dead. Was that what it meant? Was I carrying more than just a heart? Desperate, I reached out to an old friend, Toby, who worked in medical billing for a hospital system upstate. He owed me a favor from back in the day, helped him hide a DUI from his boss once. I called him at midnight, begged him for help. I just need a name, I said. The donor. The person whose heart I got. Please, Toby. I'm not okay. He said it was confidential. Legally sealed, he told me. I cried. I didn't mean to. I just broke. That night, I drove 2 hours to his place. showed up on his porch with a bottle of bourbon and the eyes of a man who hadn't slept in a week. He let me in. By 2 a.m., he was sitting in his basement with his laptop open, typing with shaking fingers. The screen glowed on his face, and I watched the color drain from it as he read. Then he leaned back and whispered, "Oh, fuck. You're not gonna want this." "I do," I said. "I need it." He turned the laptop toward me. The name was redacted, but not the notes. Male donor, Caucasian, age 47. Death via lethal injection. Convicted of multiple counts of murder. Modus operandi, kidnapping, torture, dismemberment. 9 confirmed victims. Victims varied in age and gender. All were found in a soundproofed basement, room lined with white tiles, metal chair, fluorescent lights. My stomach dropped. He confessed voluntarily, walked into a police station, said, "My work is complete. No remorse, no family." Signed the organ donor form in prison. I couldn't breathe, because I knew that room. I'd been in that room, in my dreams. But it wasn't a dream. It was a memory. His memory. His name wasn't listed, but in the corner, in red ink, was a handwritten note. Alias, Griggs. That night, I didn't dream, but I also didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, heart pounding in my chest. His heart. Every beat felt louder now, more purposeful. It wasn't just keeping me alive. It was waking up. The next morning, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the faint scar on my forearm, that pale, almost surgical X, barely noticeable unless the light hit it just right. But once you saw it, it never left your mind. It was like looking at the aftermath of something old, something intimate. Not a wound, but a signature. Griggs. That was his name. Or maybe just one of them. A man who tortured and murdered 9 people. A man who confessed without blinking, who told police his work was complete, before laying down and letting a lethal injection take him into silence. And I was carrying his heart. It beat inside me, day and night, not just as a muscle, but as a memory. I knew I couldn't go on like this. I had to know more. So I did something I never thought I'd do again. I went back to Mercy General. It had been over a month since the transplant. I didn't even know if the surgeon who'd done the procedure was still around, but the receptionist remembered me. She smiled when she saw me. "You're the miracle?" she said cheerfully. I almost laughed. I asked to speak with Dr. Lansing, the transplant surgeon. After 30 minutes of waiting, he came out, older than I remembered, with a bushy gray beard and kind eyes. He greeted me warmly. "You're looking well," he said. "How's the new heart treating you?" I stared at him for a moment. I needed out. He blinked. "Excuse me? I need you to take it out. This heart. It's not mine. I don't care what it saved. It doesn't belong in me." He looked uncomfortable. "I'm not sure what you mean." "I mean, I know who it belonged to," I snapped. "I know what he did. You put his heart inside me, and now he's in me." The room went very quiet. Dr. Lansing sat down. "I'm not at liberty to discuss donor information," he said calmly. "You know that. But if you're experiencing complications, physical or psychological, we can get you in touch with our trauma counseling team." "You don't understand," I said. "This isn't guilt. This isn't depression. I see what he saw. I dream of what he did. I smell the bleach, the blood, the rust, and I'm awake when I do." His eyes shifted slightly. "You're not the first." I froze. "What?" He looked down. "I shouldn't tell you this. I could lose my license, but there have been 2 others, both heart recipients from executed inmates, one in Texas, one in Florida." I leaned forward. "What happened to them?" he sighed. The man in Texas ended up in a psych ward, claimed he couldn't sleep because someone kept breathing through him. Said he remembered things, violent things. They found him dead in his room, slashed his wrists with a spoon. And the other, woman, Florida, drove her car off a bridge, left a voicemail for her sister saying she could feel him moving inside her chest. I didn't know whether to scream or cry. This shouldn't be happening, I said. Organs should be clean, sterile, not haunted. He looked at me with pity. We screened for infections, cancers, autoimmune risks, but not for souls. That night, I went home and dug into every public court record I could find. Griggs was just an alias, but a unique one. I found a cold case thread on a defunct message board, a rabbit hole full of police reports, leaked documents, and anonymous posts. And there, deep in the archives, I found it. Michael A. Griggs, born 1972, executed 2024. Crimes, confirmed murders over a decade, all tortured, no known pattern, conviction. Turned himself in with precise locations and burial maps. No plea deal. Immediate confession. The photos attached to the article made my blood freeze. One was a crime scene photo, grainy and yellowed from age. It showed the room, the white tiles, the metal chair, the restraints, the buzz of a flickering light caught mid-flash. I stared at that photo for hours. Every detail in that image matched my dreams exactly. The stain on the left corner, the rust along the drain in the floor, even the angle of the fluorescent fixtures overhead. I hadn't just imagined it. I had been there, through him. Then I found something else. A transcript from his final interview before death. It had never been published. Just raw text, likely leaked by someone inside. The interviewer asked Griggs why he turned himself in. Griggs's answer chilled me, because it wasn't about killing. It was about transferring. Transferring what? The ritual? To who? To whoever's next? I sat back, my heart thudding. Or maybe his heart. He wanted this. He wanted to be inside someone else. He knew what organ donation would do. Not just keeping him alive, but keeping him active. He wasn't done. For days, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his memories. Sometimes I was a child, watching rats crawl in the basement. Sometimes I was an adult, sharpening tools in silence while the hum of an air vent echoed above. I began to feel things that weren't mine. A craving. Not for food or drink, for control. I'd stare at strangers and imagine what their faces would look like, gagged, what their voices would sound like screaming. I hated it. I begged myself to stop. I tried therapy, church, medication. Nothing helped. I wasn't thinking these things. He was. Then the blackouts started. It began with moments. Seconds, really. I'd blink and suddenly be in another room, or outside, or in the hallway with no memory of why I left the apartment. One night, I came to in the bathtub, fully clothed. There was a knife on the edge, blood on my hands, blood on the floor, but no wound, no pain, and worse, no memory. I checked the news. No reports of violence, no missing person, but deep inside, I knew he was testing limits, pushing boundaries, and learning the Furumi. There are two kinds of terror. The fear of something happening, and the fear that you're the one making it happen. The blackouts blurred that line until I no longer knew where I ended and he began. They started infrequently, just tiny lapses. I'd be brushing my teeth and find the water still running an hour later, toothbrush on the kitchen counter instead of the sink. Or I'd open my eyes and be standing outside, keys in hand, parked on a street I didn't recognize. I told myself it was exhaustion, sleep deprivation, trauma, all the usual excuses people use to keep from unraveling. But then I started waking up with evidence. Blood on my sleeves, rust under my nails. One time, a woman's earring in my jacket pocket. I didn't know who she was. I didn't want to know. I stopped leaving the apartment. Didn't trust myself anymore. I blocked the windows with bed sheets and lined the front door with furniture. My phone stayed off. I unplugged the TV. I threw the knives into a garbage bag and locked them in the trunk of my car. And still, I blacked out. I'd wake up on the floor, in the shower, on the fire escape. My hands always trembling. Except sometimes, they weren't trembling at all. Sometimes they were perfectly still. The urges came next. I tried to keep my eyes shut whenever I was in public, even briefly. But they wandered anyway, followed people too long, tracked their routines, imagined their weaknesses. What if I stepped just a little closer? What if I followed him around the corner? What if no one ever found out? I didn't recognize these thoughts as mine. They weren't. But they used my voice. One night, I made the mistake of going for a walk. I was stir-crazy, hadn't breathed fresh air in days. I told myself I just needed to move, to feel human again. That was a lie. I know now it was him, stirring. I passed a convenience store and saw her, mid-30s, wearing scrubs, carrying a gym bag and a cup of coffee. She looked tired, distracted, alone. And just like that, my feet followed her. I didn't decide to. They just did. Block after block, she walked, unaware. I stayed in the shadows, 2 paces behind, watching the way she moved, wondering how long it would take her to realize she wasn't alone, wondering what her voice sounded like when she was afraid. We reached her building. I was only 2 steps behind when I stopped. Not because of guilt, but because something snapped back into me, like surfacing from deep water. I saw my hands clenched into fists so tight, the nails left bloody crescents in my palms. I stumbled backward, collapsed into a gutter, and vomited. I made it home, eventually. But that night, I dreamed of her, the woman in the scrubs. Except this time she was in the room, bound to the chair, gagged, bleeding, and I was holding the scalpel, smiling, always smiling. I started locking myself in the closet to sleep. I thought maybe it would stop me. Maybe he couldn't control a body that was contained. But every time I woke up, I was outside of it. Once on the floor of the kitchen. Another time, curled up at the base of the stairs in my building. One night, I found myself in the utility closet down the hall. There was a box cutter in my hand, and blood in the sink. I panicked, called Toby again, begged him to check missing persons reports. Just tell me if something's happened. Please. He sounded tired, distant, like he didn't want to get involved anymore. I don't see anything, he said. No murders, nothing weird. You need help, man. But he paused before hanging up. I saw something strange, though. A hit on an internal report. What kind of report? Hospital security footage. A man in scrubs entering the surgical supply room after hours. But there was no shift scheduled. When they checked the logs, nothing was missing. Just a few blades. My mouth went dry. And, I whispered, they sent me a still from the footage. He was quiet, then said, "It was you." I hadn't left the apartment in 3 days, or so I thought. The time gaps were growing. I started setting up a camera. Old webcam, duct taped to the bookshelf, connected to motion detection software. First few nights, nothing. Then one night, it recorded something. I watched the footage the next morning. The screen showed me lying in bed, still, unmoving, until 3:42 a.m. Then suddenly, I sat up. Not groggy, not stretching, just up, like a puppet being pulled by strings. I walked to the closet, pulled out a box. From it, I retrieved something wrapped in black cloth, unwrapped it. It was a knife. I didn't even own that knife. It was thin, surgical, long. I walked to the bathroom, out of frame. 2 hours passed. At 5:48 a.m., I walked back in, hands wet, clothes stained. I placed the knife back in the box, rewrapped it, and tucked it deep in the closet. Then I returned to bed and lay back down, exactly where I had been, as if nothing had happened. I ran to the closet. The box was there, the knife, there, stained, smelling of rust and bleach. I screamed, punched the walls until my knuckles split, smashed the bathroom mirror, and there, on the mirror's edge, I saw it. Another scar. This one above my right collarbone. Faint, old, but not mine. Another signature. Another piece of him leaking through. I realized something horrible that night. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't a haunting. This was integration. Every blackout was a lesson. Every urge a signal. Every action a rehearsal. He was learning how to be me, better than I ever had. I stopped pretending to be in control. The mask of sanity I wore, at work, in therapy, in grocery store lines, began to crack. I spoke less, slept less, and feared silence most of all. Because in the silence, I could hear him, not in words. He didn't whisper. It was in the rhythm, the heartbeat, that damn heartbeat. It pulsed with intent. It wasn't mine. Not anymore. I returned to the hospital, unannounced, 3 p.m. I walked into the transplant wing like a man in a trance, found the staff desk, and demanded to see Dr. Lansing. "I need this heart out. I don't care if I die," I said. They tried to calm me down, lead me to a consultation room. I laughed in their faces. "You don't understand. He's inside me. He's taking me." A nurse approached, arms raised in that cautious, therapist kind of way. "Sir, I think you're experiencing a psychiatric. I'm experiencing a goddamn invasion." 2 orderlies were called. I saw them exchange looks, one nodding toward a discreet red button under the desk. I panicked, ran. I don't even remember reaching the stairwell. All I remember is the feeling of that heartbeat in my chest, hammering, laughing, enjoying the moment. That night, I was discharged from the hospital's psych hold after 48 hours, and a well-rehearsed speech about stress and trauma and grief. I was released with pamphlets, Surviving Transplant Trauma, Life After Death, a new you support groups in your area. I threw them in the trash outside the hospital doors. He laughed in my chest as I did. I went home, convinced I had one final choice to make. If I couldn't cut him out, maybe I could burn him out. I stopped eating. I turned off the heat, locked myself in. The cold didn't matter. He liked the cold. So I gave it to him, turned the apartment into a freezer, sat in silence, let myself rot. Weeks passed. I didn't shave. I barely showered. The smell was unbearable. But somehow he didn't mind. I was turning into him, not metaphorically, physically. My posture changed. Shoulders hunched, gait heavier. I caught glimpses of myself in dark reflections, windows, doorknobs, puddles. And the eyes weren't mine. They were hungry. Then came the blood. Not mine. Never mine. First it was stains, on my pillow, on the floor, on my fingernails. Then larger amounts, smears on the bathroom wall, dried crust under my shoes. I searched every inch of the apartment. Nothing. No body. No wounds. No evidence of a break-in. Just blood and silence. One night, I awoke in the alley behind my building. Hands raw. Knuckles scraped. Mouth tasting of iron. There was a tooth in my coat pocket. Human. I held it in my palm and wept. He was getting stronger. I was vanishing. Desperate, I reached out to one last person. Claudia, my ex-girlfriend, the only one who knew me before the transplant. She agreed to meet. Neutral ground. A coffee shop near the campus where she was finishing her nursing degree. She barely recognized me. Jesus, Liam, what happened to you? I wanted to tell her everything about the dreams, the memories, the blackout violence, but I didn't have to because she already knew. Her hands trembled as she stirred her coffee. I got a job at the hospital, she said. Administrative. I wasn't supposed to look, but I did. I saw your donor file. She swallowed hard. It wasn't just the murders. I leaned forward. What else? She looked around, lowered her voice. There were more than 9 victims. They only found 9. But the records, the private ones, they suggest he kept going after his supposed confession. I felt my stomach twist. What do you mean? She slid her phone across the table. A photo, grainy, night vision. A man in a surgical mask walking through a parking garage, wheeling a cart covered with a tarp. Timestamp. 3 weeks after Griggs had supposedly turned himself in. They think he had an accomplice, she whispered. Or maybe something worse. I stared at the image. My hands began to shake. Because I recognized the gait, the shoulders, the way the figure held their arms. It was me. Claudia looked terrified. You weren't at home that night, were you? I couldn't answer, because I didn't remember. She reached for my hand. It took everything I had not to jerk away. Liam, she said softly, you need help. Real help. She didn't mean therapy. She meant something stronger. But I didn't need help anymore. It was too late for that. That night, I dreamed for the last time. Not of the white room, but of a mirror. I stood before it, staring into my reflection. But the reflection didn't mimic me. It watched me, with a smile I couldn't feel on my own lips. And then it whispered. I couldn't hear it at first. The voice was distant, underwater. But then it rose like something from beneath the floorboards. You're not losing control. The reflection stepped forward. You're giving it. I woke up in the kitchen. Knife in my hand. Hands steady. No tremble. There was blood on the counter, blood on the floor, and blood trailing out the front door. The door was open. Whoever it was, they had gotten away. Or maybe I let them. Maybe he wasn't trying to kill. Maybe he was just practicing. For the first time in months, I felt warm. Not the warmth of comfort, the warmth of ignition, like something inside me had finally caught fire. I didn't fight him that night. I didn't claw at my chest or drown myself in cold showers or scream into pillows. I just sat in the middle of my apartment, blood-slicked hands resting calmly on my knees, and let the silence throb. There was no voice, no commands, no split personality arguing inside my skull. There was just me. And I understood, finally, that he wasn't possessing me. He was me. I burned the photos, all of them. Childhood albums, graduation, my first apartment, Melissa and I at the lake, smiling, laughing, stupid, pointless snapshots of a life that no longer applied. Then I took the knife, the one I didn't remember stealing, the one that had always been sharper than it should have been, and etched a second scar into my left forearm, parallel to the first, another X, because he had been one man, and now we were two. The police never came. No reports filed, no questions asked. Either the victim survived and ran without looking back, or he made sure nothing could trace back to me. We were learning. I tested it. Stood outside the grocery store again, just like before. People passed me by, oblivious. I watched a man walk his dog, a teenager laugh on her phone, a mother juggling 2 bags and a crying toddler, all so vulnerable, so trusting. And I felt nothing. No guilt, no hesitation, just calm. Like I had always been this way. He had given me something, not just memories, not just instincts, clarity. For the first time in my life, I wasn't anxious or uncertain. I didn't feel tired. I didn't feel pain. I felt free. He had died in a prison cell, but his work hadn't been complete. That wasn't a farewell. It was a promise. And I was the continuation. I tested boundaries, followed people deeper into alleys, traced their steps across multiple nights, learned their patterns, what time they left work, where they lived, whether their windows were locked. I didn't act. Not yet. Because this wasn't about chaos. It was about precision. That was his art. And now, it was mine. But something unexpected happened. I started to remember things I never lived. Moments from his life. I saw flashes of a basement before it was painted, before the chair was bolted. I saw his hands shaking the first time he tied someone up. Heard the prayer he muttered under his breath as he raised the knife. He had been afraid too, once, but he learned, and now, so would I. One night, I returned to that basement, not the real one, but the blueprint in my mind. I walked it in my dreams, step by step. I could see where he'd reinforced the walls, where he'd hidden the drainage system, where the soundproofing was thickest, and I realized something chilling. I could build it. Exactly. I moved, left the apartment, took nothing with me, used a different name, found a fixer-upper house on the edge of town, cheap, abandoned, the kind of place neighbors didn't ask questions about. It had a basement and concrete and potential. Renovation took weeks. I blacked out less during that time. He didn't need to take control anymore. We were aligned now, 2 hearts beating as one, 2 minds cohabiting one vessel. There was no struggle. There was only construction. I covered the walls with plastic, then tile, installed heavy bolts on the door. I reinforced the support beams, put in a drain, set up lighting, buzzing, flickering fluorescent bulbs, just like in the dreams. And then I installed the chair. Steel, bolted to the center, leather straps on each arm, perfectly balanced. A place of silence, a place of understanding, a place where the world paused and purpose began. I don't know if I'll ever write again after this. This is not a confession. This is not an apology. This is a record, a continuation of the truth that man once lived. Michael Griggs was not a monster. He was a surgeon of the soul. He saw people for what they really were beneath the surface. And now, I do too. They don't scream because of pain. They scream because they're finally seen. Last night, I found my first guest. He was waiting, sitting on a park bench, crying into his hands, alone. The kind of man no one would notice missing. He looked up at me like I was the only person in the world who saw him. He was right. I did see him. This morning, I woke up without fear. My hands were steady. The tools were clean. The chair is ready. The light is humming overhead. And for the first time since the transplant, I'm warm, not just in my chest, but in my purpose. This isn't the end of my story. It's only the beginning. And if you're reading this, you should start locking your doors again. because the man who died never finished his work. And now, neither will I.